Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I am your innkeeper, Vase Odin, and in this very special episode, I will be reviewing a custom investigator by internet handle Mr. Wolf. That investigator is Vanessa Blanco. Before I begin, for those of you who don't know about custom content for Arkham Horror the card game, let me just tell you what that is real quick. Community members who love the game have taken it upon themselves to add to the game by creating custom content. Some have created custom scenarios, some entire campaigns, some just a custom card here or there, custom art for existing cards, custom investigators, even custom tokens, markers, and storage solutions. I mean, you can think of anything in this game. There's probably some kind of custom content for it or fan-created content for it. Some players just love the game and can't get enough. Others just have a really cool idea they'd like to see in the game, and so they make it for themselves. None are official Fantasy Flight licensed product, and a lot should be provided for free as it's made without a license. Of course, items such as tokens and markers don't need a license, and the creators should be compensated for their work. If you'd like to create your own custom content, you're free to do so, and I'm going to post some resources in the video description that can help you in those efforts. I'm also going to post the link to an aggregate website that has compiled custom player content for you to download and use in your games for free. Alright, on to Vanessa. Her creator, Mr. Wolf, worked with the amazing artist Fabian Perez, and I was very impressed with when I saw both the work that was put into the mechanics of the card and the artwork. The artwork is just phenomenal. Alright, so Vanessa Blanco is a survivor with a 5 in willpower, a 3 in intellect, a 1 in combat, and a 3 in agility. Her special ability is that she can add a memory traded card from her discard pile to her personal victory display after she defeats an enemy. She also adds that enemy to the victory display and draws a card. She also has recently been errated. There is a text in there that says that every elder sign treated as a autofill and so on and so forth, but the creator has errated that to say the elder sign token you automatically fail in the skill test, and forced when you would draw a tentacle token you get +1 to the skill test instead of failing it. If you don't have any memory cards in your discard pile, you automatically succeed instead. Finally, she has a 6 in health and an 8 in sanity. Pretty standard for pretty much most investigators, either 6 and 8 or 8 and 6. 14 points is pretty standard. Her deck building requirements are only a deck size of 20 cards. She can pick from survivor level 0, neutral cards 0 to 3, and spell cards of any level. So it's fairly limited. Most of her signature cards are balanced, and if you focus her deck building, she's going to play just fine. You can't add any basic weaknesses onto her deck, and you also can't add any cards with an Elder Sign. Now, the Rotten Waltz is a card that starts in play. It's a decent card, actually gives her a lot of flexibility. She is going to pull a lot of memory cards throughout the game, and this will help you at least mitigate a lot of them that are weaknesses. She tends to have a lot more weaknesses, especially at level 0, than your typical investigator. Mr. Wolf said he plans on changing some things for the one signature card called the Eldritch Needle, although I felt most of the card was fine. The cost of it was pretty low. So at one resource, I think I would increase that, but I think the rest of the card was okay. It just needs a slight rebalance is all. Another interesting card that I really liked in this deck is In Mirror I See You. There's some great choices that make this card amazing and flexible. The seal mechanic for the autofill is pretty cool too. I really like that they added a lot of choices on a card that you play. I think it's something that hasn't been explored that much in Arkham Horror the card game, but I think only encounter cards tend to have choices that you have to make. In this case, I really enjoy the fact that it's a player card that has that much flexibility. Something really cool. I'm a big sucker for roleplay and storytelling, and I think Vanessa Blanco is amazing when it comes to that. Her suite of signature cards and weaknesses tell a story that's very immersive, and they work really well off each other. With the way that she plays, I found myself pulling one of her signature cards or weaknesses just about every round, sometimes even 2 per round, and it just kept telling the story. It was really cool. Her deck building is pretty good, and due to not being able to add any weaknesses, you can really freely build a 49 XP deck without consequence. I think this is something that Mr. Wolf didn't really think about, and if he did think about it, he did restrict her pretty much in her deck building to the point where, I don't know that you can even put a 49 card deck together for her, but even if you could, it wouldn't be extremely overpowered, I don't think. But just something to keep in mind when you're playing her in standalone mode. One thing I do think Vanessa suffers from is her limited deck builds. Due to her low combat score and the Fabio con Blanco weakness, she's pretty much forced to rely on spells for combat as opposed to the survivor card pool. This means that at lower levels, the efficient decks that I built for her started to pretty much look very similar. I guess for an investigator like her, this is kind of expected, but just keep in mind that you really don't have a tremendous amount of options, especially with only being able to add 20 cards to her deck. And not necessarily a bad thing for an investigator like her, but something to know before you decide to use her. I initially thought having so many signature cards would create a sort of mini game within each scenario, and I thought it might take away from the game in multiplayer. But in the 2-player games I tested her on, she played well, and the extra story that evolved was interesting, and it didn't really detract from the scenario at all. In fact, I really enjoyed the story as it developed, sort of an internal struggle with some deep emotions and longing for a long-lost love. All this while she investigates just to try to keep her mind off of him. I could feel Vanessa's pain and her need to see her lover one more time, every single time I pulled a memory card. Whether it was a good memory or a bad one. I felt as the scenario went on, when I pulled In Mirror I See You, she wanted to look deep into Fabio's eye one more time before she died by the horrors of the mythos in the current scenario I was playing in. When Fabio would be put back into play, it was a struggle to get rid of him quickly because he was a very big threat. In these moments, I felt I truly understood Vanessa. She was longing for the feeling of love and her lover himself, as she may have had a benign memory of him as opposed to his true self. When memory of him would emerge, she quickly wants to do away with them, whether it's due to pain or the realization that she may have a very idealistic memory of their past together. And she just doesn't want to think about it. His appearance every time would bring her back to reality, but after she would banish him and those bad memories, she would once again fill herself with the good memories that made her long for him once more. I used the following deck in standalone mode for Return to the Gathering and Return to Miskatonic Museum. She performed very well for both. I had a few close calls with being defeated, but was successful in solo for both scenarios using standalone rules. I then ran her in a few 2-player games. One was in the Eternal Slumber paired with Skids. The two did very well, but were ultimately defeated by the clock as the final agenda advanced before they could win. This is a common happening for me in that scenario. I have never beat that scenario, so it's not saying that she's weak or Skids is weak or that them together. They actually did very well, better than most pairs that I've run through that scenario, so that does say something about her. The second game that I played in 2-player was a custom scenario named Against the Wendigo. You can download it in one of the resource websites that I'm posting in the video description. I paired her with Carolyn Fern. The pair did very well and won the scenario. It was challenging, it was fun, and Vanessa definitely carried her weight. I found that she works a bit better for combat, as the Rotten Walls takes up an arcane slot, and that means that you can't use combat spells and Rite of Seeking together. You can't use the Book of Shadows either in order to increase the number of arcane slots, so you're kind of stuck with just one arcane slot for your entire game, and this presents a problem as a lot of spells take up an arcane slot. There are spells that don't, mainly events like Ward of Protection, but just something to keep in mind. I didn't use her at level 0, but as you can see in my deck list, there are only a few cards without a level 0 version, actually just one, which is Shards of the Void, and you can easily replace that with a couple of other Mystic spells. So the deck would play very similarly at level 0 as the one that I played in that standalone mode. Overall, I really enjoyed playing with Vanessa, and I would love to see more fan-made investigators like this with complex mechanics and unique builds. You can find a link to her cards in the video description. Just keep in mind, this is still in beta mode or playtest mode, so any feedback that you post here, I will get back to Mr. Wolf, or you can just give the feedback back to Mr. Wolf based on your own findings if you play her, and let him know anything that he might need to tweak or change. I'm sure he would certainly appreciate it. And that does it for today's video on Vanessa con Blanco. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, consider leaving a thumbs up for it. As always, leave any comments in the description below. This is Innkeeper Vase Odin for the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime.